Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. An elder in Betchacombe has been without running water since before Christmas, and it's not the first time this has happened. There's some hope on the horizon, but it's a problem that's lingered despite years of asking for help. Sarah Komolowski has the story.
I put this here because this is the one that keeps the heat inside. Mm-hmm. And if I open it, all the cold air goes this way. Yeah. But right now the furnace is going. Keep it like that so that the heat stays inside. You thaw out my water. You want to come on in? I step on this chair here. I put my feet on. Okay. And I grab a hold of this and I clean up. I use this axe every morning to break the ice to get water. Wow. This is the axe. Because I have grandchildren, I hide my axe.
Celine Wayne says she's hauling about 10 buckets of water a day from her tank. And that's just for drinking, dishes, and cooking. It's hard for her to climb on and off the chair.
I don't walk good. I have polio in one side of my leg when I was young, so my leg is not that great.
But she says the worst part is not being able to use the toilet. 5 of her young grandkids are staying with her right now, along with their parents. They're all using a honey bucket. For showers, they're relying on sponge baths.
It's sad, deeply sad inside, but I can't show it them. But I cried. My son saw me cry. He said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "I can't do nothing for my grandchildren because we got no running water. They all need a good bath, you know? They all need a good bath. I need a good bath, a good shower."
She says the pipes in her home aren't properly insulated. Her partner used to fix them himself, but since he died in 2017, they've been freezing every winter. It's just the biggest of many problems with her house. The air comes through a gap between the windows and frames, and the foundation is unstable because of where it was built. She says she's been routinely asking her local Clunchon government representatives to repair her house, and last week she got some good news. The Clunchon government confirmed to CBC that they will fix Wayne's house, and they said they're working to move her into rental housing during the repairs. But Wayne still doesn't know when that will happen. CBC received no reply from the Clunchon government about a timeline.
If I ask you to fix it once, you'll probably do it, you know. But I can't keep bugging them to get my pipes fixed. I wait patiently. That's going to be done.
Housing NWT told CBC they also have funding to help elders like Wayne repair their homes.
In the last 18 months, Housing NWT has done a strategic renewal exercise, and there have been a number of actions that came out of that would be supportive of making things easier for the clients and the seniors in particular in this case.
Increasing funding for repairs, sending workers into communities a couple of times a year, and collaborating more with Indigenous governments, including the Clunchon government. Celine Wayne said that she would accept help from anywhere, but she doesn't know how to apply to these programs. She's hopeful her temporary housing from the Clunchon government will come through soon. Sarah Komolowski, CBC News, Yellowknife.
The deadline for businesses to pay back pandemic loans passed yesterday. But after a tough couple of years and an evacuation last summer, some in Yellowknife say they're disappointed there wasn't another extension. Robert Holden reports.
Even though pandemic restrictions lifted long ago, many Yellowknife business owners say they're still feeling the aftershock. That's why they wanted the federal government to push back a loan deadline. If paid by Thursday, the government was willing to forgive up to $20,000 on those loans. Now they'll start to accrue interest. Known as CEBA, the loans were meant to help shore up businesses during the emergency. But since then, other emergencies have hit the NWT. Rami Kassem says he's all paid off, but at an additional cost.
And now I have to take a loan to pay a loan. And to go through financial institutions, you know, it's take time and so many documents to do that, and there was a struggle.
The deadline to pay has already been pushed back twice, but Kassem says businesses like his lost a whole month's worth of revenue last summer when the wildfires hit. The Yellowknife Chamber of Commerce says they've heard that concern too. Executive Director Melissa Sire says the chamber spent 2023 advocating for an extension and were surprised at the final decision.
I was just disappointed for, all businesses across Canada, but especially for us in the north in Yellowknife after the summer we had. and then that was after COVID. Businesses really could have used, a little extra time.
Sire says the chamber will continue to monitor the situation and help where they can. Meanwhile, Kassem says he wished he'd had another 12 months, but he's thankful for the assistance during the pandemic and still holds hope for the future of the Yellowknife business sector.
It's hard, but it would be better if actually they give us the break till the end of the year. Better for us, but otherwise, what you gonna do? Yeah.
Robert Holden, CBC News, Yellowknife.
Unseasonable temperatures have been wreaking havoc on ice conditions around the north this winter, and that includes Nunavut's Kivadluk region. Warm temperatures in much of the Kivadluk are creating more sea ice overflow than normal, and that in turn is causing slushy conditions near the shoreline. Snowmobiles, as you see, are getting stuck in the slush. Elder and hunter David Uluyuk from Rankin Inlet says the ice in the community is too thin. He says he noticed it while trying to go feed his dogs by snowmobile.
It is really scary and dangerous right now. It will be better if people do not go hunting when the weather is bad. It seems to be happening everywhere and people need to be cautious.
Uluyuk says he's hoping the solid ice will start forming soon, and he's reminding everyone who goes out on the land to always bring safety gear and a tracking device. Rankin Inlet is forecast to return to more seasonal temperatures next week. At least one Kwanlin Dun First Nation citizen says the Whitehorse Dam is contributing to dismal returns of salmon. The Yukon Energy Corporation wants to renew its 25-year water use license for the facility. William Carlick says the dam has long impeded the movement of salmon. He calls on the company to fix it.
So the question that need to be asked is, where did this whole thing go off the rails and snuck up on us to the point where I say the salmon stock is basically near extinction, like the cod stocks in Newfoundland. For us, it's a cultural relationship we've always had with the animals. They weren't just there because they happened to be there out of evolution. They were put there as a gift for us as the two-legged to look after them, and in turn they looked after us.
Yukon Energy says it plans to figure out how to protect salmon. That includes reviewing the fish ladder and finding out how to steer salmon away from the turbines. The company wants to relicense the dam until 2050. The Yukon Environmental and Socioeconomic Assessment Board is reviewing the proposal. Loblaws is backing away from reducing 50% discounts on nearly expired food. Earlier this week, CBC reported that Loblaws planned to cut the discount. The grocery giant has stores in both the Northwest Territories and the Yukon. Now, that move was widely criticized by people who rely on the half-price items, especially as the price of groceries continues to rise. After all that feedback from customers, Loblaws decided to scrap the plan. People can expect to start seeing the 50% off stickers returning in the next few weeks. The NWT is poised to follow the federal government on a major issue. By April, it'll exempt home heating oil from the carbon tax, and there are plans locally to extend that to propane and LNG if it's possible. But questions remain about whether the carbon tax is the solution the territory needs. For more on that, here's NWT Finance Minister Caroline Wozniak.
This is where, asking, is it the right way to go? Well, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If the federal government's actually trying to achieve significant change in terms of the reliance on diesel, is the carbon tax the right way to do that in the north? It's difficult to change what you're doing when there's not a lot of alternatives available. In the Northwest Territories, we already have people saying they want to get off diesel. The high cost of fuel in and of itself, even without the added carbon tax, I think has motivated a lot of people to look at converting to propane, looking at biomass heating, converting to wood pellets, changing their homes, getting the Arctic Energy to come in and do the energy retrofits from the energy analysis. So I think people in the north are already motivated by the high costs of fuel and by the fact that we're at the front lines of climate change and seeing those changes around us. Do we need a carbon tax that is not necessarily tooled to the realities of that to add the incentive? I'm not sure that people did. Hopefully it does provide motivation on a larger scale, though, that we can now turn and say, okay, this is a priority of the federal government. We'd like to see the associated investments to make the large-scale changes we need to truly get the North off of a reliance on diesel.
This is the CFPC's largest attachment, home to elite units, federal and municipal scope. Congratulations on making the cut.
Have you spoken with your father?
I'm coming for you and everyone like you.
I would rather be Baroque than blue.
Lots of reasons to not be a cop.
A Surrey girl should know all of them.
Maybe you should reconsider the uniform and everything that it represents.
I'd rather fight from inside it to make a change.
Why, hello. It's me, Seth Rogen. 10 potters will be facing off in the most extraordinary ceramics competition show that this country has ever seen.
I'm Jen Robertson, and I'll be your host.
So are these potters ready?
This exploded.
To test their skills at the wheel and push themselves every week?
Oh, no. So the ones that do stand out, they really do stand out.
And who will be named champion?
I'm excited to see it. Oh, wow!
Of the Great Canadian Pottery Throwdown.
It appears we have a mystery to solve.
You will be next.
He's dead. A murderer who's murdered.
Toronto Constabulary, stop!
Here we go.
Make it mini!
I'm gonna push it. Let's go.
My hands are shaking.
This is all very overwhelming.
Don't expect anything normal.
I can't believe it. I'm here.
Yesterday was a historic day for Nunavut with the signing of its devolution agreement. That means that some things in the territory are about to change, but many of those changes won't happen overnight. For example, the historic agreement won't change Nunavut's regulatory process for development, but it will change who gets to say yes or no to those projects. Dan Vandal is the Federal Minister of Northern Affairs. Right now, his office makes decisions on whether development projects will go ahead in Nunavut. With devolution, that final say will go to a minister in the territorial government.
We're always there to consult, to talk about the issues. That's never going to change. The relationships are not going to change. If anything, this makes relationships even stronger. And I could not be happier that decisions on land and water are not going to be made by people who live in Nunavut. That's the way it should be.
Vandal also said that Nunavut's devolution was the highest priority in his mandate as a minister. He plans to continue his work with Nunavut as the territory moves to complete the devolution process by April 2027. Regulatory processes are just one piece of the devolution puzzle. The final agreement is over 200 pages. It can all be a lot to take in. So here's Andrew Chang from CBC's About That to break it down.
Nunavut in Canada's north is literally sitting on a gold mine. No, wait. 3 gold mines that in 2019 alone brought in $850 million. Nunavut's rich in all kinds of resources: iron, uranium, zinc, nickel, great for the electric car market. But you know how much the territorial government would get when those resources are extracted? Nothing. It's been like that for years, but that will change.
Nunavut is marking a huge milestone today, one that takes us toward independence from the federal government.
Yes, the federal government is relinquishing control. The fancy term for that is devolution. Basically, the transfer of power and decision-making from the federal government to the territory.
It's really the last major province-like authority that is being transferred from the federal government.
And that has real dollars and cents implications for all of us. So a good place to start is the question of why Nunavut doesn't already have control over its own natural resources. Well, geography is a big part of it. If you're not from Canada, you may not know that Nunavut is a huge chunk of land up north, bigger than any US state, bigger than Alaska, with very few roads, a massive coastline, and yet a relatively small population living in disconnected communities. Even after it formally became its own territory 25 years ago, Nunavut wasn't entirely the master of its own land. The federal government was in charge of roughly 80%. The other 20% went to Inuit through a land claim. But that 80% the federal government was responsible for, it believed that only it should administer things like land and resource development, and that full self-governance for the territory would take time.
Paternalism on the part of Ottawa was a long time thing. But the other one was that northern communities, both the territories but also the Indigenous communities, were very worried about being saddled with responsibilities without the resources to do it properly.
Resource development is really the last of the powers that remained with the federal government, which, from the territory's perspective, has been a really contentious thing. I mean, just think about it. It basically meant that when it came to natural resources, a federal minister who might live thousands of kilometers away in Ottawa would have more say than an MLA who actually lives and works in Nunavut. I'll give you an example. In 2014, an iron ore mining company proposed a big expansion on Baffin Island, one that would have seen it triple its output. Nunavut's planning commission said no. Doesn't work. It would have meant much more traffic, both on land and at sea. But in a controversial move, the federal government kind of circumvented Nunavut's planning commission, granting the company an exemption, bypassing Nunavut's regulations, going directly against the recommendations. Now, in the end, fast forward a few years, a change in government later, that project didn't go through. But still, it shows how this kind of relationship between the federal government and the territory can be really challenging.
Residents of the territory didn't have the same rights as provincial citizens. You know, they vote for a government that doesn't have the power to decide, participate in managing the land and resources. That was done in faraway, colonial, distant Ottawa.
That's Dennis Patterson, by the way. He's a former senator from Nunavut, and he's been working on getting this devolution agreement passed for years now.
It's been a sticking point in the north that we don't have the say in managing our resources.
So how does devolution actually unfold? Like, what do the two sides agree to? Well, I should say, this is just the start of a very long process, 3 years, to hash these things out, covering big areas like wildlife, environment, and yes, resource development. And a big part of that resource development conversation has been what to do with royalties. Because if a company comes along and says, hey, British Columbia, we'd like to cut some trees down on public land, the province effectively charges for that, right? And in BC, just to use that example, that adds up to billions of dollars in revenue.
Nunavut has diamond potential. In fact, there's a project that De Beers holds on Baffin Island. It's sort of in abeyance right now, but we certainly know there's diamonds there. So in the future, if diamond mining goes ahead, then those royalties would go to the government of Nunavut.
So they will get the lion's share of resource revenues, and they will be able to use those resource revenues to offset costs of housing and health as they see fit.
Now, of course, this is a much more complex financial arrangement than just, okay, Nunavut, you handle everything, so you get everything. Because Nunavut also receives annual transfer payments from Ottawa. Next year, projected to be just over $2 billion.
The issue here is that the territories are too small, the responsibility is too big, the geography too large, and the unique circumstances too profound to allow sort of standard southern provincial financial arrangements from working.
So there's a whole formula for how Nunavut can keep 100% of the royalties up to a limit, something like $9 million, before Ottawa starts to reduce the size of the transfer payments. But the net gain is still supposed to be in Nunavut's favor.
Now the territorial government has a real incentive to find ways to mitigate impacts and make developments succeed.
The list of next steps is lengthy. For example, as part of the devolution process, the federal government has to remediate all federal lands that are contaminated before transferring them back to the territory. These are old abandoned mines, construction sites, military bases, equipment left behind, contaminants that can seep into the ground and the water. It can cost millions to clean up.
There's quite a good deal of attention been given to an orderly way of addressing those contaminated sites, which are really inherited from the federal government's management of our lands and resources.
And of course, you can't just transfer these powers and responsibilities without actually transferring a workforce to maintain all of it, right? And everything that comes with it. Office buildings, warehouses, staff housing. It's all transferring to the territorial government. And this is actually one of the biggest hurdles. Nunavut needs to make sure that it has the workforce to do the work the federal government currently does, some of which is done from Ottawa, thousands of kilometers away. Do those people relocate, or does Nunavut have to find some other way to fill dozens of critical jobs?
That's why there's a 3-year transition, so that it will allow time for people to get trained up in land and resource management, environmental sciences, fields related to the management of lands and resources. That's a big challenge.
And though there's broad agreement about the direction of the deal, there are some very big disagreements too. Offshore development is a big one. That's next on the table to negotiate. In the past, Ottawa has been against offshore oil and gas drilling in the Arctic, banning it. Nunavut's premier at the time called that colonialism.
So now the people who will be making those decisions will be residents of Nunavut.
All of this to say that this is a very complex process, and it really is just the start. Again, 3 years to make all of this happen, to hash out the fine details of how it would actually work. The road ahead is long, but this is also undoubtedly the beginning of a new future for Nunavut.
The Edmonton Oilers are making a different kind of history right now. They've won 12 games in a row, tying the record for a Canadian team set back in the 1960s. The recent success comes after the team had one of the worst starts to the season in the entire NHL. Here's Travis McEwen with more on this reversal of fortunes.
It's spectacular footage. The Montreal Canadiens in the 1967-68 season, a team that held the longest win streak for a Canadian NHL team at 12 games. But they're not alone anymore.
Draisaitl scored it. McDavid back to it. Stuffed home.
5.5 decades later, they're joined by the 2023-24 Edmonton Oilers, who defeated the Seattle Kraken at home Thursday by a score of 4-2.
Edmonton's won 12 straight.
Looking back, maybe after the year or whenever, I think that's when you have time to reflect. But right now, we're in the moment. We're just looking to continue to get better.
You certainly can't take anything away from a team that's won 12 in a row in a league now with so much parity.
The banners show the dominance in the 80s, but it's surprising to some that those teams don't hold win streak records.
If there had been overtime back then with that powerhouse team, they might have won 15 in a row. But as it was, there was ties back then, so they won 12 and tied 3 for 15 games.
This Oilers team may have tied a historic record, but how memorable the streak may ultimately be could depend on how they end the year.
It's all pretty cool, but it's also just a bit of a quirk. I mean, I was looking at the numbers. There are 11 teams that have had 13-game win streaks or longer. Some of them are among some of the great teams in hockey history, and some of them certainly aren't. New Jersey, does anybody even remember this? New Jersey early last season won 13 in a row.
And standing in the way of that 13th win, the Calgary Flames in a Battle of Alberta on Saturday.
With our streak and them chasing us in the playoffs, there'll probably be even more animosity and more of a rivalry, and it'll be great.
No matter the result, this is a team that started the season at the bottom of the standings, and now 3 months later, sit in a position to make the playoffs. But with 3 more months to go until then, nothing is guaranteed. Travis McEwen, CBC News, Edmonton.
And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, you can always go to our website, cbc.ca/north. We leave you now with a look at the weather across the north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a great weekend.
Closing this case gets you one step closer to you getting back on the squad and keeping you out of prison.
You're not a detective. You're a con artist. You have a driver's license, right?
Of course, I'm 9. If you couldn't be a cop, what would you be?
Nothing. My dad raised me to be a cop. That's who I am. Stay here.
You're adorable.
You guys are making this entire station look like a circus.
He's busy trying to solve a murder. What are you doing?
Thanks for having my back.
I got you.
Is this your girlfriend? This is not my girlfriend. She's way too cool to be your girlfriend. She's not way too cool to be my girlfriend.
Who's that?
He's fired!
I'm starting to think you don't know what a joke is.
You're gonna eat nothing but raw spleen.
Getting into peak physical shape is 50% training, 50% diet.
Never occurred to me to bring lawn chairs out here. Never occurred to the Egyptians to build the pyramids until it did.
Oh, simpler times.
Let's set you up with a lunch date. You're deaf? I don't know. Sign. This feels a little round.
If accessibility is wrong, we don't want to be right.
Spicy. Oh, do tell.
Breaking news. The critics are talking.
Oh, this is it.
Imagine the Wonder Years if it were written by Gene Shepard.
They twisted it all up.
Well, you can't trust a newsman.
Highly recommended.
Onwards.
Onwards.
Heartwarming.
This doesn't mean I'm better than anyone here tonight. It just says it.
100% fresh.
Well, I suppose we don't need to get rid of the cable right this second.
Son of a critch.
You look like a cod gasping for air.
Name something you see people do on TV that you secretly could do better.
Host.
I knew that was hard.
Family Feud Canada. Watch free on CBC Gem.
We want you to know that you can ask us anything. Need help with your Riz?
You just made Riz uncool. There is something that's been bothering me. Are mutual funds or ETFs better for my long-term goals?
Load weapon!
Welcome to the show!
Fire! Big, 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 big! I'm from the Liberal Party, and I...
This is the CFBC's largest attachment. Congratulations on making the cut.
I'm coming for you and everyone like you.
This job has one rule. Follow orders.
Every week, the issues that matter to Canadians.
These are acts of desperation.
Connecting politics to people.
Some people have lost everything.
Join me for Rosemary Barton Live.
What do we know
About that with Andrew Chang.
I think we can explain.
Watch free on CBC Gem.